currently with Drake University, and you can see on this first slide sort of a cribbed version of my business card. One of the bonuses of being in the room today is that you actually get handed one. So that's your prize for showing up. So my goal for this presentation today is that you walk away with a basic understanding of how to approach prospect research in the most beneficial way for your organization. Each shop is different, and you may not have an in-house researcher, but I bet somebody, even without having that specific title, does this work to some degree. It's just about being strategic. So let's get this thing started. I'm sure my little remote control works. Let me know that if we just press on the screen, then it would start working. There we go. All right, so first of all, let's start with the definition. What is prospect research? The logo that you've got there in the middle of the slide is APRA. Everybody loves a good acronym. That's the Association of Professional Researchers for Advancement. And that is our professional group where all of us can share the same tips and tricks, some of which I'm sharing with you today, best business practices, and it's also where we talk about ethics, which is really important in any aspect of fundraising, but it's particularly important in prospect research because, referring to the ethics statement, researchers must balance an individual's right to privacy with the needs of their institution to collect and analyze, record, maintain, use, and disseminate that information. So it's important to note that everything we're going to be talking about today is publicly accessible, which is a bonus for us because that means all of these resources are free. I'll talk a little bit about how, if you're interested, you can augment the things that you find online for free with paid services, and we can talk about some vendors. And I'd be happy to take any questions specifically about my experience with some of those vendors at the end. But right now, this is just kind of about the quick and dirty way to maybe start integrating prospect research best practices into your fundraising and development needs right now. So for me, prospect research is essentially about uncovering leads and finding the people that are going to be your donors. My handy-dandy visual looks like it's kind of bleeding over on the slide. So what you should see underneath Affinity is the word capacity. Affinity and capacity are going to be the X and Y matrices by which we define whether or not somebody is a top prospect, somebody who has the affinity but maybe not the capacity, vice versa, or somebody who's not a prospect at all. So affinity, I think about this as, will a donor give $100 or $100,000? And that affinity equals action. And then capacity is, can this donor give an amount to your organization? So we're talking about assets versus actions. And the top donors, the champions of your organization, will be folks that have both. So here's that matrix that I was talking about. And you'll notice at the very top, VIP, high affinity, and high capacity, these are the people that if you're trying to either build a portfolio of prospects that your one or many dedicated fundraisers need to manage, this is who you ideally start with until they themselves say, you may consider me a VIP, but I don't consider that. Unfortunately, some of the best prospect research falls flat when you get out in the field. That's just the name of the game. And then your next best is going to be low affinity but high capacity folks. So these are your long shots, right? But it's important to track long shots and determine what the hook might be for your organization for that donor. When you know that you've got capacity, it's obviously not going to be helpful for you to try and get a call with Bill Gates unless you've actually got a grant that you think might get some traction at the Gates Foundation. Or, FYI, if you've got an employee of the Gates Foundation, that is a prospect for you because they have a 3-to-1 match. So just FYI, there's a little bit of research nerdy factoid if you need that. And then you've got fans. These are usually the people who are going to give you their time because they have a lot of love. They have high affinity for your organization, but low capacity. These people can be just as important if they're giving an amount of time that is commensurate with a major gift. And sometimes the passion that these folks have for your cause is something that will attract those major donors because they want to know that you're going to be a good steward of their funds and that you're actually, if you're direct service, that there's boots on the ground and you're fulfilling your mission. And then finally, womp womp, these are sad people, not a prospect. they don't have the ability to make a donation to your organization, and they don't care about your organization. So really, I always tell myself when I find these folks who go into this bucket that it's better that we know now, because time is a very important resource. And the most frustrating part about going on this bottom half of the x-axis is that these are our low affinity people. But when you're talking about long shots, I find that sometimes they refer to themselves as not a prospect for you, and you need to keep them on your radar because you may just have to find the project that they care about, or it could turn out that even though they may not directly have a bright line of affinity from their organization, from your organization to them, rather they may really love and admire somebody who serves on your board, or they may really respond to a donor story, or they could connect you to a private entity, a corporation, or a foundation that they feel would be philanthropic, even though they themselves may not give you a donation. All right, so we are nowhere without data in prospect research, and you need to make sure that your data is clean. Any data at all can be useful unless it's filthy, and then we don't want to look at it. I'm talking about Excel spreadsheets of 10 years of contact reports. Sometimes you inherit that stuff. It makes me want to weep. Ideally, your shop would be able to afford, or you would have somebody savvy enough to find you a free CRM. And if that's even just an Access database, that can work too. So for gathering data, this is where you determine what do our prospects look like. And your past is a snapshot of where you have been and where you would like to keep going. If you've been successful, then the past is a model. And there are actually plenty of companies that would be happy for a fee to tell you exactly what the statistical model of a donor for your organization looks like. These are people that will look at everybody who has given to your organization in the past and will determine your ideal donor. Jane Doe is 45 years old, mid-career, an executive, an annual donor that steps up into major giving somewhere around year 5 of donating. The stuff gets really slick. But if you're doing this yourself, look to your annual reports, your volunteer history, and definitely do a peer screening with your board or whatever oversight organization is most useful for your fundraising arm. So annual reports are important because this is a place where you're going to be able to track the recency, frequency of giving, and also the amount that your donors are giving to you. This is where you're going to make sure that you don't lapse or hemorrhage donors. Sometimes there's a reason that, somebody who's been giving to you the entire 10 years that they've lived in Des Moines or wherever you happen to be, it's a rough year, or they explain to you, hey, we're sending the kids to college, come back in 4 years. That's another thing that you need to make sure you keep in your database. But if you're losing people because you're not asking them, that is your fault, and you need to know why you're not asking them. Your volunteer history. It's important to know if somebody dipped their toe in the water of your organization and showed up to a gala, maybe cut a check that night or bought their tickets beforehand, or maybe they were just sitting at that table as a guest of another big donor for your organization. You need to follow up with them. How was the gala? Did you enjoy our executive director's speech? Is there anything that particularly piques your interest? These are the folks that can sometimes be low-hanging fruit, and this is when I call up my fundraisers and say, go get them, bloodhound time. So peer screening with the board is really important because what you can do is give them those annual reports and those volunteer lists that we were just talking about and say, do any names jump off the page for you? Or you can give them other board lists from organizations that are simple, annual reports from other organizations, and headhunt a little. People steal donors all the time. You're just spreading the love. You're not stealing a donor, just connecting them to more causes that they care about. So everything that we've been talking about should have a longer shelf life than just this presentation or that conversation with your fundraiser. Not only do you need to track external conversations, but internal conversations. If you are lucky enough, like I am at Drake, to enjoy Blackbaud's Razor's Edge, which many researchers consider the Cadillac of CRM. I love working with it. My Blackbaud check is in the mail, apparently. then you are able to put actions in that determine when the follow-up is actually going to happen, which means you can hold your fundraisers or yourself accountable. This is also something you can easily track with your Outlook calendar, your Gmail calendar. There's a sticky notes. Sticky notes are a little old school. Makes me nervous about what happens to the note when it falls off of your monitor because the glue got old, but still. So what you're going to be doing in your database is looking for patterns. Are we doing best practice? Are we talking to everybody that we should be talking to? Are we planning to plan way too often and never actually going out and making the ask? I guarantee you every organization suffers from that. Even Drake suffers from that. Oh yeah, how come that gift never came in from Jane Doe? Well, nobody's talked to her since 2012. That's our fault. Okay, let's fix that. So the other thing that you need to do about data is make sure that you're strategic with the information that you capture. You do not want to find out that for 6 months out of the year you are not able to talk to one of your top donors because you do not have their seasonal address, or because you're mailing to their current address and they're in Florida. The same thing goes with business and cell phones. So many people are moving away from having a landline anymore that anytime I see a home phone number in our database, I kind of cringe a little bit and wonder whether or not this is just the common practice of people referring to their mobile as their home phone anymore, or if we have no way of contacting this person now. So make sure that you know how to reach your people. That's very basic. And then also family relationships. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have spoken to a fundraiser who comes back and has that hanged-on book saying, I had no idea this person was the sister-in-law of our board chair. And I said, well, that's in the file. That's your fault. Read my research. So where does this research come from? The internet, also known as the secret Google. It's kind of an inside joke in my shop. There are actually some tricks to Googling successfully, and so you always end up feeling like a wizard when your fundraiser comes in, very frustrated, like, I know that this person I managed passed away and I'd really like to send his spouse some flowers and a note of condolence, but I can't find it at all. So in that specific case, you can see my tip there is for don't actually search the name and the search obit and the term obit, but do survived by. You want word strings when you're Googling. So this works for anything, in my opinion, when it comes to, I heard over coffee at Panera, these people weren't even at my table, but somebody was saying something about Jane Doe company acquisition, selling, blah, blah, blah. Search that exactly. Anymore with the number of folks that tweet and blog things in a much more natural way, you're far more likely to find the information that you're looking for if you actually tell Google this is the word string that I want to see. If I want to see Jane Doe daughter graduation, that's probably a bit more successful sometimes than just searching graduation or daughter. You want the words together. So newspapers and publications, whether you still get a hard copy delivered to your office or if you're seeking this out online and that's where your subscription is, I always look at publications online just because I want to be able to do a keyword find, just Control F and search for the name of the person. Newspapers and publications obviously have obituaries and other very important milestones like weddings and birth announcements, and they also have lists. Lists are great because this is when you have two opportunities. One, you can capture a wealth asset information, like, oh, they were listed under most expensive homes. That's wonderful to know. They probably have the capacity to make a gift. Or if they were on 40 under 40, not only do you know that they're an up-and-comer and they clearly carry some clout in the community, but this is also an opportunity for you to reach out to them and say congratulations, which is a very important touch. So a lot of prospect research works this way. It vacillates between being a hard science and a soft science. Most expensive homes, that's current market value. It exists right there. A 40 under 40 naming might mean that you go out and tell your fundraiser, hey, go send Jane that thank you note, and next thing you know, you've actually got a warmer touch than just a cold phone call when you're going to ask her for her annual gift. Social media is really great. It's an excellent tool for relationship mapping. Relationship mapping in general is a very big trend right now in prospect research, just because donors are getting so sophisticated that they not only want to know you, but they want to know who you know that they also know. Everybody loves to hang out with their friends. That's the whole point of social media. Same thing goes in philanthropy. Also, you know connections, and that's going to help you when you go to make an ask, and you might need somebody to either solicit the gift for you because they've been unresponsive to you or to your fundraiser, or if you want to, in the middle of a conversation, pivot towards them sharing a gift or going out on a challenge, any sort of strategic approach to raising the funds that you need might be useful. It's going to be really hard for you to get everybody together for who went to camp 1 year or graduated 1 year or all attended the very first Heart Ball if you don't have that list, or if you are going to hop online and see who they're Facebook friends with, who they're blogging about, and who they're tweeting to. One of my favorite websites is LinkedIn, just because, and I'll show you this in a screen cap in a few slides, if you don't have a CRM or donor profiles, like a canned push-button profile that you or your fundraisers can quickly print out before you go on a donor call, LinkedIn is your friend. You can just hit download as a PDF, and then all of the information that they've volunteered is a donor profile for you. And make sure that you're capturing that. It's a great way to know when people move into new positions or how long they were at one place, and whether or not their time overlapped with somebody else. So another free resource is going to be the Iowa Ethics Campaign and Disclosure Board. This is really great because political giving and philanthropic giving a lot of times will overlap. Obviously, there's legal caps to certain political gifts, but if somebody has the ability to give a candidate a couple $1,000s, that probably means that those are monies that could also easily be philanthropic dollars. And this is probably a good opportunity for me to point out that all we've got in this PowerPoint presentation are screen captures, but everybody is going to be provided with a link to a Prezi presentation version of this, which contains hyperlinks. So don't worry about seriously taking notes unless that's something that you want to do. All of this will be contained in that Prezi presentation. So getting back to IUCDB, what you are probably primarily going to be looking for is contributions to committees, and you can see that that's the first choice that I've selected. And when it asks what contributions are you looking for, you're going to want contributions from an individual, which is the second option. And then if you were able to scroll down, you would see that they ask for there's all sorts of variable data if you just know a last name, because you want to see if multiple members of a single family or a household are giving, if you just have an address. This is also a really great way. Should a person be politically active? If you just have an address but you're not quite sure who resides there, this is a reverse lookup. You can see if anybody at that address was making charitable contributions, because you can't lie about that stuff or the government comes after you. Another fun one is the Notable Names database. This is an aggregator. So, profiles from Forbes or publications, if they post them online, they all get thrown together and they create profiles for you. You'll see that when I took this specific screen capture, I had the search bar option full text scrolled down, and I would just search the entire database for any time the word Iowa appeared. This is also a really great place if you want to go out and find a slick, canned profile for, John Papa John, for example. These are going to be big fish, but it's also really great, too, because if you see on my left-hand side of the screen, the mapping tool will actually show who within the Notable Names database is connected to each other. SEC, what you're going to want to do is search under company name. They purposefully make this misleading, in my opinion. So intuitively, you would think, oh, okay, company name, I get that. I'm searching for an individual who might be an insider trader. It's the same. There's no other place that will actually say individual search. You can just type down Johnson, and then you will get everybody whose surname is Johnson and Johnson and Johnson, right? Underneath, more options, and I wish I would have thought about this when I took the screen capture, but you'll just have to trust me that it's there. When you hit more options, there is a toggle that says include or exclude ownership documents, and you are going to want the ownership statements. These are forms 3, 4, and 5. This is where you're going to be spending most of your time with SEC documents because they're the ownership disclosure forms. Make sure what you are looking at is as current as possible because the SEC keeps really good files with EDGAR, and you can go back and if you really want to torture yourself and say, for example, why didn't that gift come in from Jane Doe in '98? And you go back and say, I see that she sold all this stock and none of that money came our way. That must have been why she named that hospital. Too bad. So FEC, this is another one that's good. You should approach this in the same way that you would the Iowa campaign disclosure. Not only is this great for ensuring the level of gift that you think might be realistic to ask for, but you have to declare your occupation. So if you are curious about why somebody doesn't have a LinkedIn profile, and yet you know that they're working, you know, they're a doctor, lawyer, butcher, baker, one of those very employable things, one of those very employable occupations, they should say on their actual individual contributor report what they were doing at the time they made the gift. So that's just sort of a helpful thing. And this is another place where you will turn up everybody that has that name. If you're working with a very generic name, I would keyword search for the states they live in. So for most folks, the easiest wealth indicator to find is going to be real estate and farmland, especially here in the Midwest. So if you have an address, that is wonderful. Or if you have a name, if you have both, then you are in the money. But you've got to work with what you've got to work with. So county assessor websites, again, there'll be screen captures in a few slides, are dependent on that individual assessor. So sometimes there will be a search field for name, and sometimes there will just be a search field for address. And sometimes there's just a search field for the actual PIN number for their plot, and those assessors make me really sad. Because then I probably have to go out and try and find an interactive GIS map and reverse look up what that actual parcel number would be. It's a lot of work. It's not fun. You want to know where an address is. This is also important. County assessor websites are super great because if you have one address and you're able to search using that address for other holdings, you're going to be able to find out that, oh yeah, they're very nice country home in Madrid, Iowa is actually attached to 100 acres, which means it's more than just a $200,000 house, it's a $1 million property. So Christina Pulaski is a bit of a touchstone in the research field. She curates it wonderful. It's not at all beautiful. It's very simple, but it's a updated quarterly national database of all assessor sites. The Midwest is really good about having one site that no matter what state you pick, insert state assessors.com. I'm always going to iowassessors.com. You can toggle around to either of the Dakotas, Minnesota, Illinois, Nebraska, but anything outside of that region, I don't know, we're very Midwest. We all banded together and wanted to be honest about what we own, I guess. If you are looking in California or Illinois or Florida, all of which are particularly heinous in my opinion, you're going to want to go to Pulaski.net and look at her database of assessor sites. And even then, it's a little bit like falling through the rabbit hole. Some assessor sites are just a single page that has the headshot of the assessor and a phone number. And if you are really chasing down a big fish, I highly recommend that you call. My entire presentation is pretty much couched in what can you do behind a screen, but you would be amazed what happens if you just call an assessor and say, I'm just trying to verify that Jane Doe lives on Highway X. Yep, she does. Okay, great. So when you're moving past assessed value, which is assessment, wealth for tax purposes, not wealth but value rather, Zillow or Trulia or Redfin or any of the other sites that might pop up when you are searching an address string through Google has current market value estimates, which is great because we all know when the recession hit, suddenly folks were going to have half, a quarter, or 0% of the philanthropic budget that they had, mostly because the bottom fell out on real estate. So when you're looking at farmland, two of my favorite resources are Iowa State's Extension. They do an annual farmland value survey, which shows the current year's farm values compared to last year's. And so when you go to your friendly Dickinson County Assessor site and determine that Jane Doe holds 300 acres, well, what does that mean to you? You go and look at that county on the ISU extension map and then multiply it by whatever it is, $10,998, and then you have a certain idea. This is also really great when you're actually booking gifts or you're booking an expected pledge and your donor has been forthcoming and says, I'm going to give you a third of my family farmland that I have in Lee County. And you go back to your comptroller and they say, great, how much can we expect? This is how you determine what that amount is going to be. Environmental Working Group is sort of a reverse lookup resource in terms of if you don't know how much land they have, if you're working with a county assessor website that doesn't let you search by name or that doesn't have a searchable database at all. That happens more often than I would like it to. You can look at federal farm subsidies and determine based on the amount of the subsidy, and you know, this is really rough, like back of the napkin kind of calculations, how much land they have. I mean, if it's $10,000 of subsidies, they've probably got a little pleasure farm, but if it's $100,000, that's a significant amount. The EWG website is also useful because you would be able to see who owns a percentage share of that farming operation. So, you know, Family Farm Incorporated up in Webster City, you want to know who's a part of Family Farm, and it turns out that it's not Jane and John Doe, but it's Jane and John and their respective spouses and all of their children. So if you find out that John wants to donate some of his land that's held in this, you know, incorporation, you're not getting all of it. You're probably getting a tenth of it. So this is an example of that IowaAssessors.com site. You can search by county, by city, everything along the top that's currently highlighted in gray. That's the view that you have right now, but you can toggle between all of those. If you were able to scroll to the right, you would be able to see past Missouri that they've got Nebraska and the Dakotas and all those other states that I've mentioned. So even though you're going to IowaAssessors.com, you have pretty much all of the Midwestern county assessors aggregated for you in this one place. And you are going to be crossing your fingers at this point, hoping that the county assessor you are looking for is in blue, because that means that they have a searchable database. Data being online with Vanguard is good too. That's just another vendor that county assessor works with to control all of their data. And this is actually a Vanguard landing page that we're on, so that's just as good as the data being online with, you know, that own assessor's database. You're going to be sad if you get the gray, which is website only. And you can see in Iowa, because we are so fabulous here, it's a good state to be a research in, you are only out of luck if you are looking in Fremont, Ida, or Ringgold counties. Like I said, we're really honest here. So I told you, nothing fancy with the Pulaski.net site. This is what the tax assessor database looks like. The top left is where you toggle between states, and then she's got an embedded Excel spreadsheet for every site, every state site. That's what you click through and see. And then you will select the hyperlink along the right, and it will take you into that specific county assessor site. I thought I'd include a screen capture of Zillow just in case folks weren't quite sure what that would look like. Zillow is my preferred. I've noticed that sometimes Trulia or Redfin will have listings that Zillow doesn't, but I like Zillow because you don't even have to scroll. It just shows you right there exactly what the current market information is, and sometimes it can get a little buried on Trulia, I've noticed. This is also really great because sometimes if they're pulling from the same place you would be pulling, the assessor's website, accurate sale information, you can know whether or not the home was recently purchased or if it was recently sold. This is also a great way to know when your donors are on the move or how long they may have owned that home on Lake Okoboji that is just for fun. So here's an example of the most recent ISU extension land survey. When you go to the link, it just instantly downloads the PDF for you. And so you can see that the top is the 2013 value in each county and then compared to the 2012 value. So if you're really committed, I just suggest you print this out and keep it taped somewhere near your monitor. Handy dandy. So here's that EWG search page I was talking to you about, which I love because you can search by city, you can search by zip code, name, and state. You're going to want to know what state you're looking in. And sometimes if you find out that your person owns farmland along the border, search that neighboring state as well. I can't tell you the number of times I've been researching people in the Quad Cities that own land on both sides of the river. And then business name is useful too, because that goes back to what I was pointing out earlier. There's this huge chunk of Cassuth County that's owned by Family Farm LLC. Okay, so search Family Farm LLC in Iowa, and then you'll find out what recipients are actually tied to that business. Another good place to search by business names, and shame on me for not including this, is obviously just the Secretary of State. Go to the Iowa Secretary of State website, make sure that that business is still in existence and that it's a registered name, and see who filed the papers for them. I can't tell you the number of times that I've had to find out, is this the John Smith that we're looking for, or is it a different John Smith? That happens a lot. And you can find out whether or not it's their business by going to the Secretary of State website. Corporations and foundations are very important, even though they're not necessarily constituent prospects. You can gather really important information about your prospects here, depending upon who their employer is. And if you want to know compensation information, for example, market trends, whether or not they were recently laid off, whether or not they were promoted, and then also whether they're a matching gift employer, whether they have a separate foundation, does that corporation's philanthropy only go as far as sponsorships, or do they actually give community grants? Do they have a philanthropic arm? Is the foundation a foundation that doesn't take solicitations, or do they have a quarterly submitting schedule? Is it any time? Is it rolling, monthly? All of this information is going to be contained in the following resources. Forbes, this is another great place to find a professional bio very quickly. Can't tell you the number of times my VP has stopped into my office and said, what can you tell me about blah, blah, blah? And then I've just gone to Forbes and printed out something for them, and it's like I saved the world. Same thing goes with Bloomberg Business Week. It's important to check both, in my opinion, because sometimes employment dates will be off by 1 year or another. Titles can be a little messy in one, and they're a little bit more cleaned up. Senior VP of Logistics and Transportation can just actually be AVP Transport. So Manta.com is another great place because not only can you see who's registered to the business and their current legal address, but also sometimes they will have annual revenue information, which is really, really good. And Glassdoor.com is my favorite. You're going to have to open an account just like you will with Guidestar, but they're both free. And Glassdoor.com is a self-reporting portal for salary information. So salary information will be shown in ranges depending upon how many people have actually submitted a salary point for that specific position. But, if you're going to go out and ask for a gift for a transplant surgeon at Mercy and you want to know, well, she's sort of a young woman, she's 38, should I be asking for an annual gift of $1,000 or should I be asking for a $10,000 gift? You can gauge based upon her salary what might be appropriate. My free advice is that you ask for $10,000, flatter her, and then if she only comes in at $1,000, that's what you get. But I'm the go big or go home person. So here's an example of what Manta looks like, just in case you've never been there. Bozeman, obviously, being a private business, doesn't have their annual revenue information here. But what's great is you can see the SIC code, acronyms. And so you can look them up, and if you need to make sure that this Bozeman the florist in Iowa, is it all related to the Bozeman the florist in Illinois? All of that stuff is really interesting. Sometimes you've got two completely unrelated Bozens, and you thought that your person was the owner of that business, and they weren't. So here's a screenshot of Guidestar. Guidestar is important because that's where you're going to get the 990s. Everybody loves looking at tax forms, I know, but all you're going to have to do really is scroll towards the bottom where you've got the grants and contributions paid during the year approved. And just a little snapshot of what that would look like is it'll show you the organizations that they granted to, what the purpose of the grant was, and the amount. So then you can determine, wow, they gave 50% less or more grants in 2012 compared to 2013, or they give to every other church in the area except us. Why aren't we going and asking for our piece of the pie? This is also a really great way to go and look at other family foundations and see what their granting activity is like if you need to compare and contrast. You know, we know, for example, that Jane Doe and John Smith are really good friends, and the Smith Family Foundation has the capacity to give us $5 grand every year. I wonder what her foundation would look like. If they're similarly organized and if they have the same amount of assets, ask for the same amount. In case you're curious, I think you can kind of see this is a little snapshot from the Cy Twombly Foundation. So here's Glassdoor. I was researching somebody who was employed at the Mayo Clinic and just took a quick screen capture the other day. So you can see the importance between asking for a gift from a research fellow versus a research associate. You could probably get a significantly larger gift from the associate than from the fellow. And knowing what Mayo Clinic pays compared to Cedars-Sinai, all of those are going to be different. Take everything that you find with a grain of salt. You need to consider it as a data point, not the end-all be-all, like this is the way that it actually is. I have just created my own rule of thumb that I approach every piece of information that I find as if it were in a range. So that way, if we are off by 10, 20, 30% of what their salary is, we're still asking for a gift in the proper range. So this is a screen capture of that fabulous Prezi that I mentioned earlier. This is what contains all of the hyperlinks. I'm sure we're going to be able to embed this in the comments for the YouTube version of this webinar. And just in case you've never seen Prezi before, this is what it'll be like. You can just hit play, and the whole thing will scroll through the presentation, or you can toggle through according to the arrows on the bottom. But, okay, we're doing good on time. So at this point, if anybody has any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Anybody in the room, or Sue, if you've got any questions?
Just a couple of things. For some people who might be joining us or here today, could you just explain what CRM means?
Sure. You want a customer relationship management tool. So this is going to determine what your relationships have been and where you would like them to go, right? So anytime you have got a customer or a constituent, whatever term you use inside your shop, you should create a file for them where you can track information. And then this is also a really good way for you to track gifts specifically. Corporations, foundations, anything that you feel, events too. You're really lucky if you're working with some software that lets you have multiple views on your information. So, for example, one of the ways that you would look at all of this data differently is you can look at Rachel DeCurian's giving. You can look at all of the gifts and funds that Rachel DeCurian has set up, who also has given to those funds. When Rachel DeCurian goes to an event, how often does she go to those events? Who is there with her? If you have any questions about CRMs, like I said, we use Razor's Edge at Drake. When I was at Iowa State, we had a proprietary database created by Agilon One for us. Lots of people use Wealth Engine. The big trend right now is Salesforce because it's really slick and free. But then I also know lots of people that have either a data analyst or just their in-house IT guy is really comfortable with, IT guy or gal is really comfortable with Access, and they're able to create the database themselves. So it's really whatever the needs of your organization are.
Thank you. I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah.
You talked about there being free CRM. You mentioned Salesforce.
Yeah.
I'll mention that there are some smaller CRM companies across the country that are significantly less expensive than what Blackbaud is, but are equally as powerful for the needs that you have. If there's anybody who's interested in knowing who some of those are, I've got a list that we'd be happy to send you. But don't be afraid to go out, and as Rachel said, Google searches are huge. Just put in the term CRM or free nonprofit CRM, and it'll populate. I think some people sometimes forget that we're in this new age of being able to know everything at the touch of a finger. One of the other things I wanted to talk about is you had that wonderful little matrix that showed VIP and fan and
let's go back
long shot, and I want to talk about a long shot.
Yeah.
For those of us who are here in Iowa, and there's a handful of other states across the country, that utilize something called endow funds at their community foundations. Those endow Iowa or endow Kentucky, endow Wisconsin, whatever state you're in, look to see if you have them. Those can be some long shots because guess what? They have a low affinity to you, and yet they have high capacity. They're looking for something for nothing. And with an endow gift, let's say they gave $100,000 to your organization in your endowment fund account at the community foundation. They get their charitable tax deduction up front. Let's say it's 35%. Now they get a 25% tax credit. Boy, we almost never get tax credits. And for some people who are in the business world, that's a really big thing. So they may have a low affinity to you, but when they sit down with their tax preparer or their financial advisor or somebody at the community foundation and they say, give me a list of who's in that Endow Iowa business, all of a sudden there's your name and they're like, okay, that sounds good, let's do it to them. That's one of those low affinity, high capacity kind of gifts that can happen. And often we don't think that we know many of those people. We've got one of the best endow programs in the country. So if you're not familiar with that, pick up the phone, call your community foundation, and ask them more about that because that's where you could find some long shot donors. The last thing you talked about using Outlook, and I'm really happy you brought that up. So if you don't have a relationship management software package, use your calendaring system. Outlook is amazing because you can color code all of the different meetings that you have each week. Set aside some gold time. And gold time in my book is time that is godlike. Nobody touches it. They know you're going to be in your office. You're going to be working on either prospect research or fundraising or plan giving, whatever it happens to be. So make sure if you have some kind of a calendaring system, find out what more you could do with that particular system because you might be surprised at how much it can do for you. Let me just look here and see if we've got anybody else with any questions. Here's one. Could you speak more to the benefits and capabilities of Blackbaud and how a nonprofit can or should find a way to utilize such a system?
Sure. So really with Blackbaud, like Sue said, that's a budget issue. If you can afford it, do it. You will not regret it. It's so incredibly powerful. But I will say, from my experience at Drake, it's only as powerful as the culture change that comes with the purchase of that CRM. It's slick. You can start every day by logging into Razor's Edge and looking at your dashboard of new gifts that came in today, this week, this month, who they were coming from, whether or not you manage that person, amounts, etc. And then you can grab your coffee and dot off thank you notes to all of those people that you saw on your dashboard, and then click right through the name and enter in an action that said, sent this person a thank you card. If people don't start and end their day in the database, it's a lamp. It's a fancy lamp. There's no point. So you need to determine whether or not your organization holistically is ready for something like that. And if they are, but you don't have the budget, just like Sue said, find a cheaper or free CRM. Or just keep really good in-house notes. You would be amazed how often prospect researchers get turned into the contact report police. And by that, I mean, writing down everything that was said and that happened in a meeting with a donor, whether this was a discovery visit, whether it was cultivation, you're moving them towards the solicitation actually asking for the gift, or stewardship, that thank you, keeping the warm and fuzzies happening after you've made the gift. If you aren't able to track the last time you had one of those conversations, you're starting at square one again. But the reason that you want to have a tool as powerful as Razor's Edge or something similar is because you run a shop of a certain size. I would say you should be a mid to large size organization. You're trying to keep a large amount of donor files organized. Higher ed loves Blackbaud just because we've got thousands and thousands of alumni to track. But in all seriousness, since we're not able to talk to each other unless you type again in the question bar, let me scroll back to that first. Contact me. Call me, email me, whatever.
We do have another question here.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
We
just talked about product All True.
Nice. Yep.
And it allows you to put a lot of donor files. So we have a physical donor file, and now we're trying to get everything online, but there's a need for both. But it seems like some gets in the donor file, some gets all electronically. Do you have any recommendation which one really should hold the original, I mean, whether it be electronic or the original donor file?
Electronic. Yeah. I'm going to draw that line. Not only, like I said, keyword searching, and also, I'm not sure if, is that hosted or is that web-based? Are you able to, okay, so you're able to access it from anywhere, right there. That's why it's better than paper. And you would be surprised how many young, willing interns, strike students as well, would be happy to come and do free data entry for you, but that needs to happen.
And I think part of the issue might be if we ever go away from All True, then we would have to buy all that back. You know what I mean? I don't know.
No, that's yours. The software is proprietary, but you would get a data file of all of your donor information back. Yeah, no, they do not.
Can export it and then import it into the new system.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe with some customization, but
they're never going to run off with your data.
I agree with what Rachel said about electronic. Actually, when I was at Drake, we had a flood in the alumni office down in the basement. There were thousands of pieces of original information gone, stuck together, never be able to pull them apart. Scan those things and get them in your system just as fast as you possibly can.
Get rid of the original?
No, you may have to archive those somewhere, but archive them somewhere that's very safe. But I would definitely scan it, because when in doubt, if you're out on the road and you can access it, holy cow, that's where you'd want to have that. We do have another question here. It says, I work at the Community Foundation. If you need a list of Endow Iowa qualifying funds, I can provide that.
Excellent.
And remember, there are other states that do those, so if you have donors in other states, it means you have to have an Endow fund in that state. But again, sometimes it can be that long shot. If you hear something that says, ooh, that's not a real gift to us, but it might be a way to get a gift, it's not the first card I'd pull out of my pocket, but it's one I'd want to know that's there. Looks like we've got another one here, too.
Sure.
It just says, thanks to the Community Foundation and Endow Iowa pitch, you are quite welcome. Would be happy to do a future webinar about community foundations. Love it. All the data in the world doesn't make less sacred to make the first call to a prospect.
I think that was scared.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me less scared to make that first call. Cold calls are not fun. I feel that, for sure.
You know what? I think it's kind of like dating.
Yep, I agree.
You know, at least you know you have some mutual attraction, and it's the nonprofit you work for. So if you just remember that at least you have something in common, it's going to help that first foot forward go a lot easier. But just remember that your donors are really just somebody to talk to find out what their dreams and desires are. And it's no different than, you know, for some of the young people who are on, or even us older folks who maybe go out and see somebody, strike up a conversation, ask questions. And it's not unheard of for people to take a little 4x6 card with them with some notes to remind yourself, these are things I want to ask, or I want to know more about a donor. So, yeah, you can have all the information in the world, and it still can be a little scary. But the sooner you get over that first or second call with first prospects, the better you're going to be.
Agreed. And here's something that I tell my fundraisers all the time, because amazingly, sometimes we get thrown on wild goose chases in research because somebody is literally trying to stall before they make their call. So what I try and give them is information that is not only conducive to beginning a conversation, but as Sue pointed out, would be an excellent question to pose for that person. They know why you're coming. if this is a person that you should be talking to in the first place because they have that capacity, like we were talking about earlier, and they've taken the meeting with you, you already know they have the affinity. I mean, I don't want you to come back and say, Rachel DeCarian lied to me, this person yelled at me in this meeting. I mean, they may be taking a meeting with you because they want to complain about how they've not been recently receiving endowment reports for a gift that their mother gave however many decades ago. And that happens, and you got to be prepared for that. And just, you know, make yourself a drink at the end of the day. But really, the reason that they've taken the meeting is because they want to hear what you have to say. And if you feel like you're crippled because you don't have a big initiative right now or an exciting project, just go and say, I know that we're here to talk about the Botanical Center, but I saw that you were recently listed under 40 under 40. Congratulations. How about that? Or you were just part of the Greater Des Moines Leadership Group. Just start a conversation and then find your way back to why you're there, because a savvy donor, you know, doesn't want just a weird lunch date every other week. Like, why are you here? But asking for a gift will be easier if you have a sense of the person that you're sitting down with. And I can't overemphasize enough that the people who are genuinely prospects for your organization will know why you're calling and will not be uncomfortable when you ask them for a gift. They'll read it, I think, if you're uncomfortable asking for the gift, in which case, if you're new to fundraising, just let them know that. And then they'll be so happy to sort of help you, you know, in your current role or down your new career path. You know, this is the first time I'm asking for a gift. I can't tell you the number of times that fundraisers have lied about that. I just want to let you know this is the first time I'm asking for $1 million gifts, so it's a big deal to me, and they ask for one every week. But just because it makes all of those zeros seem a little bit smaller. So while I'm not advocating for all-out lying to your prospects, I think you can frame the conversation any way you want to.
And I'll remind people, a few months ago, we did one on making donor calls and plan giving. And, you know, the single best position to be in is new. Because you got 2 to 3 years to really milk that one.
Yep.
You just have to remind people, I'm new to the organization, and so this is kind of where I'm going. But, yeah, it's fun. Other questions here, or with the people who are still signed on?
I just wanted to mention that a lot of times you can go on TechSoup.org and get discounted CRM, Blackbot, a lot of times discounted on there, and on the programs are as well for our organization. Yes. Thanks so much for that. That's a great idea. That's also a good place to go if you just need to get the Microsoft Office suite. Get that Outlook calendar.
Again, don't forget, nonprofits across the country, your community foundations do capacity building grants. Often those grants can be used to help you purchase CRM software, computers, anything that will help to build the capacity of your organization. So, again,
We just wrote one for strategic planning.
Yep.
And
yeah, it's when I was first in the industry of nonprofits, I always saw the community foundations as my enemy. They were my competition. They are quite the contrary. If you're not talking to them 1 or 2 times a year to bring them up to speed with what you're doing, you're missing the boat. All right, well, we won't belabor this. A couple of closing comments. Next Thursday, we are hosting our holiday gathering in this room here in Des Moines, Iowa. For those of you who want, from 11 to 1, please come, have something to eat, have a little fellowship and camaraderie before the holidays. And then we'll take a little hiatus until January. Great webinar in January on how to record stories. One of the wonderful things that you need to know how to do when you're talking with donors and how to share those on your website. And beyond that, have an awesome holiday, safe travels, and we'll see you in 2015.